Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Theorycraft. I apologize about the glasses. I'm not trying to go all Men in Black. It's not about Men in Black for this one. Just because I suffer with migraines, I've got to keep them on because my eyes hurt. But anyway, onto this one is going to be about my favorite Marvel superhero ever of all time, which is Spider-Man. Absolutely love Spider-Man. Except for me, sorry, big Tobey Maguire fan. Sorry, Tom Holland fan. Sorry, but going into this, there's been a lot of rumblings, a lot of famous pictures being thrown about online, a lot of Photoshop pictures of Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Tom Holland, basically campaigning for these three guys, the three main actors that have played Spider-Man over the last 20 years, to appear in one movie or possibly a series, but it's all up in the air at the moment. And I actually have an idea of how we could possibly write these in. As you already know, I'm Jack.
I'm Ben.
Over there in the blue. So let's get on to this, and we're going to start off. Let's just get straight into this one. Right. So with Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man 2002 to 2007, I believe, with number 3. And then you had Andrew Garfield. You got the main one now, Tom Holland, which seems to be the most popular Spider-Man right now, as definitely, like, with storytelling wise, definitely the best Spider-Man. But except I'm going to be a Tobey Maguire fan. Sorry, everybody, but there's been those rumbles about a few famous pictures of all three of these being wanting to be lobbied and campaigned into a film of sorts. Now, before we get into anything such as how can we possibly do a story to try and insert these three guys into one film, first of all, I'll go over to you, Ben. What do you reckon about the concept of putting these three in a possible film together? So forget like the whole storytelling wise. What do you think of this idea?
I mean, it could work, the idea of a Spider-Verse, but the problem is like there's only 3 Spider-Men that we've actually seen as a live action, and they prove the point, like in the Spider-Verse animated movie, that you have to have at least a multiple variations of them to make it work. And the one that we're basing it on, which is in the 90s cartoon, did the same again, where it was at least 6 different versions. Granted, it was all Peter Parker to some degree, but at least with the new animated version of it, it was God knows how many different variations and like so many different things. And I'd love to see the idea of exploring the multiverse, because that's not been done in DC or Marvel whatsoever. And it's one thing that I wish that they would do, because they could make so much money and so much opportunity on various stories just by divulging into the multiverse.
Yeah, well, I feel that maybe with this is my favorite episode from the 90s cartoon of when you see the different Spider-Man from all different realities. You had Doc Ock Spidey, you had Armored Spidey, which is actually the billionaire, which is actually in another reality. Peter Parker is a billionaire. And I think if I remember the story correctly, that he becomes the Armored Spider-Man, which you see in the picture, because the choice which he made is like the butterfly effect. In that reality, I think he actually saved Ben Parker, I think, and then went on afterwards to become a billionaire, but that's a bit up in the air. I don't really know. You had the Scarlet Spider, and you had the multiple armed Spidey, you had original Spidey, but also Doc Ock, you had a really weird one as well, which is kind of why I'm trying to base it on this story. You had, if I remember this correctly, Ben, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you had, how do I say this? You had an actor playing Peter Parker in the actual series. Is that right?
Yeah, essentially what it was the voice actor of the voice actor that actually is the Spidey for the show, but it was the actor playing Spidey that somehow got ensnared into all of this.
Yeah, but it's actually in the show, it's a bit...
Well, I wanted to pitch this idea to you. Like, I wouldn't use him fully, but I would use the actor that did that voice acting back in the 90s as like a random Easter egg type thing.
Yeah, like maybe, I don't know, like, you know, when you had during the gameplay of like the different games and so on, you know, when you had the the narrator, like, you know, the famous like narrator voice. He's like been an actor in all three Spider-Man films with Tobey Maguire, but playing different characters. Do you remember that? Do you remember him?
I sort of do, yes.
Yeah, but I was thinking maybe you could have that, and maybe, I don't know, just have fun with like a narrator kind of role, as we've not really seen that in really many in a Marvel film, to be honest. So why not have a play around with that?
I mean, you could use him as a narrator. I was more thinking that, because the original idea of what this episode was that Madame Web and the Beyonder were teaming up to bring them all in. It could be, and I know it may seem a bit cringy in your opinion, but it could be like a random comedy like moment in this like thing when she's trying to ensnare all the different Spider-Men, and she's just picking random people associated with Spider-Man, accidentally picks him up, and he goes, "Where the hell am I? What's going on?" She goes, "Wrong one," and then just sends him back again.
Yeah, like, you don't need to do any more, but just have this like a little random tidbit in there. Go,
yes,
oh, that's the original voice actor. Like,
yes. Yeah, I'd love to see what they could do for the multiverse, but I wonder what else they would add to Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's one, because with Tobey Maguire, despite all the stuff that happened in his movies, he did get a happy ending in the end.
Yes.
But with Andrew Garfield's, his ended on a very sad note because he killed Gwen Stacy. So,
yeah.
Well, because even though by the end of the movie he was back a hero and he was fighting the Rhino, that was it.
Yeah, I know, but
I mean, it could be an interesting way of also bringing in Venom in such a way that it could be the actual symbiote gets siphoned off Eddie Brock from whatever universe he's actually based in, and Madame Web has him like captured in a jar as like a last resort to like help the Spider-Man. Now, of course, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man instantly sees the black oozy thing and backs off straight away. He knows not to touch.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't give it to Tom Holland's one. I would give it to Andrew Garfield's one, because he's probably still very depressed and very angsty from the death of Gwen Stacy. It could literally be months after that's all happened.
Yeah.
And
so if you're gonna go off that, obviously you got so the way that I'm going to try and put this across is that these three guys, like different Spider-Men, obviously different people, but in the same New York and so on. So we're going to have like these guys in completely different realities or even different Earths. So whichever one. So if you're going to do something like that, before we start getting into like the whole nitpicky, before we start getting really deep into this, whose reality would you set it in? Toby, Andrew, or Tom? Because, like you said, because from what you were referring to there, it seems like Andrew Garfield might be an interesting reality to set it in. So for that one, have him be the main Spider-Man that it's based around, and bring in the other two maybe after at some point.
I would say Andrew Garfield needs a lot more attention, because he only had 2 movies. He didn't have a fully wrapped up universe.
So why did the third movie not happen?
Well, because by that point, by the time they were like considering doing the next one, there was debates with Sony allowing some rights to Marvel so they could do Civil War with Spidey.
Yeah.
Because it was 2016 Civil War came out.
Yeah.
And I think it was about 2014, I think Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out.
Yeah.
So it does take generally a year or two for any movie to actually be in the works or whatever. So that's probably one of the reasons. I don't know officially. I'm just spitballing because I think that's pretty much everyone's theorized on. But I think it would be a great way to like bring a finality to Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, so that everyone knew what happens after that Rhino fight.
It's like a good way to tie up loose ends, so to speak.
Yes. Because Tobey Maguire,
it doesn't have to exist in like the MCU continuity.
No, of course not. No.
Like you can easily just like have it just plonked on its own little category, and I think I would be fine with that, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I mean, they technically called it the Sonyverse because it's Sony's universe, but at the end of the day, like you could easily like start it off with him just swinging through the streets, and then just perched on top of a building and thinking about giving up being Spider-Man and go from there, like to show like he's on the very edge of stopping becoming Spider-Man, but because of the journey through the movie with the other Spider-Men, it gives him some finality, and whether or not he dies in it is a different matter.
Yeah, or like maybe if he had Madam Web showing him, right, if you choose to give up being Spider-Man now, and then like maybe she could be able to show him, maybe at some point, maybe showing a vision, or maybe actually being shown that if you give up being Spider-Man, this is what your reality will look like. You know, this is what will happen to you.
See, what I would do in that sequence is that I would show it as like, you know, in Greek mythology, there's such a thing called the Loom of Fate.
Yeah.
So like there's interweaving threads and reality, all that. You could use that concept, but make it as like a literal spider web. And so she could literally show him like his thread of what possibilities on this spider web that he has of sorts.
Yeah.
And show that each of these little splinters is different possibilities if you were to take a certain route, and this is where you could end up.
Yeah.
So at least by doing that, we could get like some sort of randomization to it, but also show that there are so many possibilities and go from there.
Yeah, like, and but just before we get into like the whole nibby storytelling side of things, I'm gonna let you tell this just because I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think I had a different suggestion, but I think I had a different suggestion, but I cannot remember her name. But like obviously I know the answer, but everybody watching doesn't. But who would you have as Madam Web?
I'd say Michelle Pfeiffer. Because let me just find an image of Michelle Pfeiffer. Right. So yeah, so the whole point is like, in my opinion, she's not stupidly old, but she looks very wise. She's got a very thin face. She looks very serious. She looks quite menacing. Because the thing is with Madam Web, she's not a good guy. She's not a bad guy. She is just someone that's there to like keep the scales of balance of like things in reality.
Yeah, because you remember when she was sat on like that kind of throne thing with the spider web around, she had that black and like red sort of long dress thingy, whether that was with those weird sunglasses.
Yeah, where is it? Here we go. So that's Madame Web from the 90s, and like that's, you can see it, like it's not a very old face, but it's quite a thin face
playing that role.
Yeah, I mean the other thing as well is like I knew she played as the evil queen in that terrible movie, The Huntsman, that Kirsten Stewart played. God. But she was good as like a very powerful character that was like some sort of like very mystical, powerful character.
Yeah.
And she was very sinister, but at the same point, like I say, Madame Web's not meant to be sinister, but she's meant to be. I'm trying to find the right wording, but like it's hard to try and explain Madame Web because she's just a character that's there to keep an eye on the cosmic balance.
Yeah. So if you're gonna have that, also a little interesting tidbit, a little interesting fact for anybody watching. If you're a fan of Spider-Man, the original Madam Web from the 90s cartoon was voiced by Stan Lee's very own wife.
Yep, Joan Lee, and she did a cameo in X-Men Last Stand when Jean Grey was mucking about with the Phoenix powers.
Yep, that's very correct. Also, now we're going to get into this. From the 90s cartoon, like we have to kind of refer back to the 90s cartoon just so you guys can have a basis on what we're going on about so you don't get too lost. So the 90s cartoon, I was watching a little bit of it last night. If you take the main plot, which is, I can't remember exactly how the original Spider-Man got there, but basically there's the cosmic balance, which is in trouble. So then Madam Web has introduced the different realities, the alternate versions of that Peter Parker in order to help him out. So that's why you had like the Doc Ock Spidey, you had the multiple arm Spidey, you had billionaire Spidey, armored Spider-Man, Ben Reilly, who was a clone of Peter Parker.
I think it was supposed
Peter Parker a clone of him.
Well, that leads into a completely different Spider story, which I my head still hurts trying to figure it out after all these years anyway. But yeah, I think
anyway.
Ben Reilly was meant to be the clone of Peter Parker, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah. But anyway, going on from that, then you had a character called the Beyonder who was introduced then alongside Madam Web. So like the Beyonder, you probably have a good idea more about the Beyonder than I do, because the only Beyonder I knew was kind of like from the 90s cartoon.
Yeah, so here's the 90s cartoon version of Beyonder. He's not very fantastic, that's fair enough. But essentially, this is what, if I can find it, is what the original version in the comics, which was back in the original Secret Wars, I believe it was. So he pretty much looked like John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever, which is what the previous image reference was meant to be. But essentially, it was Secret Wars 2 that he appeared, and he was essentially pitting all of the random good guys and all of the random bad guys against one another on a random planet that he forged together himself, just to see what actually is the point of the universe. Like, he was just a cosmic entity that was bored. That was the essential point of the whole thing in the end. And
talking about the base of having like John Travolta as the main inspiration, why don't we get into why that image of John Travolta popped up on the screen earlier? Even though it was an accident, but it did mean something.
Well, let's have a look. So let's go back to that one and that. So, like, even though this is some time ago, I still think that John Travolta could play the Beyonder quite well if he literally had that suit and nothing else. Like, it's pretty damn near enough that. Like, I mean, it'd be a bit of a daft idea, but that's kind
Even though he looked like he'd just come out of like a sports sweatshop out of Sports Direct.
Or out Del Boy's bloody unit or something. But like, that's kind of the point. That the Beyonder was from the 70s anyway, so that was kind of the whole reason why they styled him like that. But I would say it would be such a missed opportunity if they didn't use John Travolta, because so many people have said that he looks so similar.
Yeah.
But at the same point, I don't know how well he would work as someone that's meant to be a very powerful character. Because, well, going on a side note, when I was watching Guardians 2 and you have Kurt Russell playing Ego the Living Planet, yes, it's been some time that he done Tron and also Dirty Dancing, but it just, I don't know. I didn't see him much as like a very powerful guy. He just looked like someone who's just very comical, and that was about it.
Yeah.
Like, obviously the MCU has a bit of a mix of good and bad. That's fair enough. Like, that's their tone. But with the Sony films, I don't know. They've always had a darker tone regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, at least with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, there was a lot of sarcasm, which is the whole point of Spidey.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm trying to figure out how the Beyonder would work in it. Would he be the actual bad guy, or would he be like in the cartoon show with Madam Web, where he's working with her to try and save the universe?
I would probably have it as him saving the universe alongside Madam Web with the alternate versions of like different realities of Peter Parker.
So then, with that in mind, what character would be the bad guy, and who would you have them play?
Right. So if you're gonna go for a bad guy, in this, I might be wrong. Because I only watched a few clips of it. I cannot remember. Was it? It wasn't Doctor Doom, was it?
I believe it was, because it was meant to be loosely based on the idea of Secret Wars, where he basically takes the Beyonder's powers and tries to rewrite reality so he's supreme.
Yeah, so if you're gonna have like Doctor Doom, that's just one, but also because because like we're adjusting things here. Like we can have a play around with it because it's not in the works. So why not have a play around with it? So if you're gonna have that, obviously, if we go back to like the MCU, because like time travel's been explored, space, alternate realities, you kind of think it makes it a little bit harder, which I suppose it does in some way. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of, you can take a little bit of liberties, I suppose, because if you want to put Toby, Andrew, and Tom in this film, then you could, like, obviously you could just, it wouldn't work in the MCU. You would just have to have it plonked on its own. It would have to be just plonked on its own in a different reality. You know, it's not even in the same timeline. It's just a standalone film. But if you're going to have, like, maybe it would take some explaining to explain how the different Earths, how the different Earth realities have somehow come together. So there's like 3 different people who are Peter Parker, like from 3 different movies. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge first off as to how you're going to kind of put those 3 actors together in the same film.
I mean, you could always have, like you say, you could bring in Doctor Doom, but you could have it completely separate again and have it either an actor from the Fox films who's meddling with reality and thus opens the gate to the Sonyverse and everything else.
Yeah.
Or you could have the MCU version of Doctor Doom who saw the whole like fiasco with Endgame itself and saw what Tony Stark and everyone else did because he's Doctor Doom. So he ends up trying to figure out a way of not only going in time, but also different realities to then be, well, more powerful because he's Doctor Doom. He's always power hungry to try and save Latveria. That's his whole shtick. Yeah. So you could have him be the one trying to muck with reality, and it could all be like some sort of secret lab that's hidden deep down in New York. So then that could be the focal point, and that's why every single Spider-Man comes into one place, because that's where every Spidey is.
Yes.
So, because the thing is, at least there's always that one consistency that it's New York is where Spider-Man is. Like, there's never any other city that they will ever be.
No.
But I'm in 2 minds into how exactly it would happen. Either it could be an explosion from the machine which results in a big white flash of light, everyone's blinded, and then everyone thinks everything's back to normal, and somehow all 3 Spider-Man end up in the same spot and get completely confused. Or it's something else entirely.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's kind of going to be, it's going to be a little bit like it's going to be, there's no point in trying to dodge around it. You're going to have, like, when you have Deadpool's famous for breaking the 4th wall completely. Yeah. So this is going to be with 3 Spider-Man breaking a 4th wall. That's breaking through a 4th wall. So, there's no getting around that. If they're going to have, wait, how come there's a different, like, how come there's like another guy? How come there's another Peter Parker who is Spider-Man here? And how can you have another Peter Parker who is Spider-Man here, but I'm the only Spider-Man? How is this going to work,
I mean, one thing I would want to run by you is both in Amazing Spidey and Tobey Maguire's films, they heavily use the idea of the Spidey sense. But in the MCU, they've slightly touched on it and not referenced it because I don't know if they even have the rights to it, ironically, to like name, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, would you use that as a way of them all being able to know that something's wrong, and thus Tobey Maguire teaches Tom Holland's Spider-Man how to hone in on the Spidey sense because he's the more older and more experienced version? Or would you just let them go, they know that there's something up because they all have Spidey sense and that's it?
No. I think you have to explore that a bit more. You had Tobey Maguire, which he had Spider sense, but the Spider sense, it was only really shown in what, a couple scenes in every film.
Yeah, I mean,
but it wasn't really touched on as to what really Spidey sense is.
Well, this is where I think Madame Web would be really helpful in explaining, like, the whole idea of Spidey sense could be something linked to something similar to what they use in Marvel called cosmic awareness. Now, obviously, Spidey sense isn't as powerful as that, but it gives them like a slight edge when it comes to like fighting people.
Yeah.
So she could at least say that she is like the avatar of the avatar of spiders, say, like the whatever you want to call it, and say that with each reality there has to be at least one person that is a spider avatar, and with that they are connected in some way to the spider sense, which allows them to have incredible reflexes and so on, because they're able to detect things within so far to try and keep themselves preserved.
Yeah.
But again, I think the only thing is, it's like Spider Sense was probably used so much in the 90s cartoon show, because I remember when it used to go flash and
yeah, and it made that really like it sounded like the old wind up internet from back in the day. Remember when it went that?
Yeah, it's like but I mean, it could be a really interesting idea if they were to like use that in some way. If they were like training, that they could use that as an Easter egg as well, like as some bizarre little thing.
Yeah,
as a special effect.
All right, so if we're gonna have that kind of general gist of cosmic awareness, like this is where we can have a little bit of fun. So if we're gonna deal with like different realities of Spider-Man, then if you're going to introduce as well, like, would you introduce like the other alternate versions of Spider-Man, or would you not, and just keep those free? Or would that kind of be a bit too much overload?
I would say when Madame Web shows them on like a spider web, like the web of reality, like all the alternate versions that there are, don't know if you would agree with me on this one, but say Madame Web shows them on the web of reality, like all the different versions. There's one reality where there's Spider-Gwen, because Gwen Stacy got so popular due to the Amazing Spider-Man film. You could have Emma Stone dressed up as Gwen Stacy as like a brief cameo thing, and it inspires Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man to like try harder or something, to know that it's not his fault that she died. It was just a possibility or something. I mean, I'm trying to think. Like, there are so many different versions of Spider-Man throughout the multiverse.
Yeah, I mean, like, you got things like Cosmic Spider-Man. You've got like so many. Like, was it Cosmic Spider-Man or 2099, or was it 2199? I can't remember.
It's 2099 is one reality. Then you do have Captain Universe Spider-Man, which was so powerful that he managed to punch the Grey Hulk into outer space. Oh God, there are so many.
I'd for sure introduce like some popular versions of Spider-Man. I would love to introduce the billionaire Spidey, who's the Peter Parker who actually saves Uncle Ben, and he eventually goes off to become a billionaire and runs his own company. And he has the metal spider suit, the armored Spidey, which I quite like. And he's like kind of he's a more arrogant version of Peter Parker, who's like an entitled bum, basically. I'm not going to say the other word. So, it kind of like plays on, it kind of played on who Peter Parker really is as a person, but like each kind of different alternate version of Spider-Man showcases a different part of his personality. You got one that's like really sarcastic. You got the actor who's really shy. You've got the armored Spidey who's really arrogant and is a bit of a bum. I just kind of like that. What like different versions of Spider-Man can be touched on. Relating to Peter Parker, so it's not like too far away from who he is.
So who would you have as philanthropist version of Spidey?
Philanthropist?
Well, philanthropist, like the armored Spidey, like the one you're just on about.
I would have Tobey Maguire because he's a bit older.
Okay,
and
so
this billionaire Spidey is, I think he's a little bit older, so I would have that be Tobey Maguire.
So would that be a continuation from Tobey Maguire's trilogy that he's that, or just like an alternate version of Tobey Maguire's movie?
No, it's an alternate version. So I'd have it so maybe kind of like a split off. So, so instead of like when he goes to like the wrestling match and fights, fights that wrestler in the steel cage. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, which Bonesaw McGraw is Macho Man Randy Savage, who I have a tattoo of on my leg.
God.
I love wrestling. Freaking not going to get into that. But yeah, anyway, he fights Randy Savage, beats him. And obviously you had the robber who tries to stick up the guy to try and get all the money from the wrestling show. And because the guy at the counter didn't want to pay Peter Parker his whole money, because I think he beat him under a certain amount of minutes, so he didn't get the full payment, so he only got like $100, I think. And the guy sticks him up, gets the money, runs out of it, and because Peter Parker was so annoyed that he didn't get like the money which he was like promised for like beating the guy, he just let him go, just to stick it to like the guy at the counter. But instead of that, he decides to do the righteous decision instead and actually chooses to stop him, and he gets arrested. Thus, Uncle Ben does not die.
So we have that. Would you use the idea that they did in the show where they had the 6-armed mutated Spider-Man?
I quite like that version, but then again, would that version of Spidey eventually turn into the human spider?
Well, I mean, the other thing as well, don't forget that Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, out of the live-action ones, is the only one that doesn't use web shooters.
Yeah, which doesn't make... I understand, like, it's a... I know Sam Raimi wants to make it a bit more realistic, but still, like, why not have the web shooters?
Well, I'm wondering whether... This is a random thought I've just had, but what if Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, partway through the film, gets exposed to something, or gets somehow Madam Web finds a way of mutating his mutation further, and thus creates a 6-armed version of Spider-Man, and then it ends up becoming the Man Spider?
Ah, yeah.
So at least it's sort of like, oh shoot. So you could have it like,
oh god, this has gone a bit wrong here.
Yes, yeah.
In the cartoon, what was he doing? He was trying to
reverse.
Was the mutation of the spider occurring naturally, and he was trying to stop it?
No, I think he was trying to find a cure so he could.
To something I can't remember.
No, I'm sure he was trying to find a cure so he could end his career as Spider-Man, so he could have a life with MJ because he didn't want to cause any complications.
And then obviously it exacerbated his mutation already, and thus making it more pronounced.
Yes. I mean, the other thing as well, like, I always found it really odd the way that the arms were, because like they all seem to come out from the armpit, which I can understand maybe one, but then like the second one has to go at least like there, because otherwise you're literally like this all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how do you do anything if your arms can't like how can you, if you were to have that many hands, going on a tangent, it's what we love. If you had that many hands, how would you know which one was which?
And yeah, plus another one, do all the arms like work independently? Can he like work the arms independently of each other? Like we can work our arms independently, or do they have to work all together on one side?
Well, I'm assuming so. I mean, normal spiders can use their legs in different ways. It's in the way that it's kind of like fingers in a sense. Like they don't move all in one go. Like they move in their own little, yeah. But it's just trying to think of like anatomically, like how would that work?
Yeah, well, that would be a pain. Like imagine which arm wipes your bum.
Well, I mean, which one could reach? Which one could reach? Because, like I say, if you're like this all the time, it's going to be the bottom one that's only going to be able to just about reach.
Yeah, and then and then going off, you had the alternate versions. I'm going to refer back to the picture. When you had Doc Ock Spidey, don't know what that was about. That was never explained. I have no clue what that's about.
No, that was just a random thing. But the ironic thing is that the majority of those things after that episode inspired stories in the comics years later. Because you had back in 2012 was when you got Superior Spider-Man, who was literally Doc Ock inside Spider-Man's body, which I'm assuming is where they got the inspiration from that show. But then you also have the idea that Spider-Man becomes a philanthropist. That happens after Superior Spider-Man. And it's a very odd one. I'd love to see Spider-Man Noir, which is the one with the trench coat and the goggles and stuff, like steampunk Spidey.
But we did get a taste of that though.
Well, that was more stealth Spidey than anything else. Like, I'm very nitpicky when it comes to Easter eggs, I'm afraid. But
yeah, otherwise, why would this channel exist?
Yeah, pretty much. But I don't know. I'd love to see the idea of Noir Spider-Man, but I'm trying to think of a youngish actor that can do a roaring 20s gangster version of Spider-Man, and I can't think of anyone that could give it justice.
Yeah, and even you had in another story, it's in a separate episode of the 90s cartoon where you had when you had Old Man Spidey, who actually this Spider-Man, it was Peter Parker. He lost his powers, but somehow I cannot remember for the life of me. I'll probably watch the episode and remember, and then go, "Oh yeah, that was it." But yeah, he lost his powers and ended up turning into an old man, which was really friggin' weird.
Yes, it was because
you did have some kind of old man Spidey in the story in the comics, though.
No, I remember what it was. It was the Vulture, because the Vulture siphoned off his powers, if you remember. And because the Vulture's suit or powers was literally siphoning people's life force to make himself younger, he ends up siphoning Spider-Man's powers, because it's not long after he has the whole fiasco of becoming the Man Spider. And so he's he gets his powers taken away, so he ends up aged up as an old version of Spider-Man. But by the end of the episode, he gets his powers back and he de-ages. But in result of that, the Man Spider mutation goes on to the Vulture.
Yeah.
See, I can never remember much, but I always remember these random little things when it comes to the cartoons. But
yeah, the Man Spider Vulture, I actually thought that was pretty cool. When I was a kid, and still looking at it now, I just think that is pretty wicked. Seeing a Man Spider Vulture.
But I've just had a random thought. I've just had a random thought as to who could be a 1920s version of Spider-Man, like Spider-Man Noir. And I know you're probably thinking, why did I pick this guy? Leonardo DiCaprio. Because he played as the Great Gatsby.
Yes, he did,
So he could get away with it, to be fair, because I think there was, once upon a time, he was slightly interested in becoming Spider-Man, but ended up doing something else, and it ended up being Tobey Maguire. Because I also know that when it was Tobey Maguire, very randomly, Michael Jackson wanted to be him as well.
Oh yeah, I remember I spoke about this in my little Marvel Facts video from a while back. Yeah, because Michael Jackson, the way that story went, Michael Jackson loved Spider-Man. Wasn't really a fan of much of Marvel, but loved Spider-Man, and he wanted to play Spider-Man so much in the 2000s film, or I think it might have been the late 90s actually. But anyway, he loved Spider-Man so much that he offered to buy out Marvel just so he could play the role of Spider-Man.
I mean, I'm glad it didn't happen because in an alternate reality that actually happened. So we could have Leonardo DiCaprio as the gangster version of Spider-Man, which would be quite cool. I'm just trying to think as in terms of anything else. Would you have any MCU cameo characters like as a random offshoot? Would you use it as an excuse to bring in anybody else, or?
To be honest, you couldn't really bring in anybody new because it just if you like, there's no way to put it in the MCU timeline. It just wouldn't work. So
Well,
maybe you could have an offshoot because I think it would be a really good opportunity. Possibly, it might just be a random cameo. I'm not sure, but I would actually love to have a Wesley Snipes Blade cameo.
yeah, that could be interesting. So,
Yeah.
So how would you bring him in? Would you say that it was just like a random Easter egg that he was just in there to like keep an eye, or because the thing is like we have the Morlan trailer that came out a few months ago, and he's essentially the living vampire, and so is technically Blade. So would you have it as like a cameo between the two of them to show off the idea of like them two fighting, and they somehow get ensnared into the middle of this whole fiasco of a film briefly, and then get snatched away? Or
Yeah, I think that would be pretty cool. I mean, you had, I think it was just in one, I think it was in one episode when you had the Punisher, you had Blade and Morbius all in the same episode.
Yes. I mean,
yeah, you had the Punisher the Punisher, I think, which was going after Blade, and then Blade was going after Morbius, and then Blade and Punisher ended up having a fight.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing as well with the animated version of Spiderverse that came out last year or the year before was that the whole thing was all organized by Kingpin, which I never understood because like Kingpin's not one for tech, he's just obsessed with being the Kingpin of New York. Now there is technically an MCU version of Kingpin because he existed for the Netflix shows, which sadly never did much because it's Netflix. But let's say, for argument's sake, that they were to use him in some way. Maybe he's working with Doctor Doom, that they're both trying to figure out the multiverse because they saw the snap and they saw the blip, that they want to explore more for their own sake.
Well, you possibly could have the cameo of Alistair Smythe as well.
Oh, okay. Like I like that.
Yeah, because like do you remember like there was just like with like when Kingpin was like obsessed with the idea with Alistair Smythe with like the portals over New York. Do you remember that?
Yeah. But who would you have play him?
What, Smythe?
Huh.
Good question. He's a difficult one to cast, actually. I'm not sure. It will come. Something will come to mind as we talk.
Because the thing is with Alistair Smythe is he's meant to be a very clever character and essentially paralyzed, but then I never understood the weird thing in the 90s show where he mutates into whatever the fudge that cyborgy thing was.
Yeah, God knows. I don't know. Who had that weird kind of those things that stuck out of his back? I don't know what that was.
But you may think I'm going to be odd here. Did you ever see Fantastic Beasts?
No, I am not. No, mostly because I just was not interested in any of those films. Like, well, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Yes. So
I'm sorry, I don't like Harry Potter. Not interested in that.
Well, the thing is, the guy that played that, the main character in that, I can't remember what he was called, but he also did a film in which they were sort of doing a rough representation of the life of Stephen Hawking. So he played as Stephen Hawking, but I could see him, in a sense, being Alistair Smythe.
Oh, yeah. I can see it now.
Like, as a rough idea. I mean, it's not perfect, but that's who I'm on about for anybody who's wondering what I'm talking about. But it
would
could.
you bring back? Would you bring back the Fantastic Four's version of Doctor Doom?
You know what? I would.
Or would you cast someone different?
Well, I mean, the thing is, regardless of this is not really going to be part of the MCU, so we could have anybody from anywhere, and it doesn't matter because at the end,
why not just have fun with it?
I would say, bring back the guy that was Doctor Doom, because despite how awful those movies were, this Doctor Doom suit did look pretty damn good. They got the mask right, they got the cloak right, and he wasn't evil. He was just someone that was incredibly smart and wanted power. That was all he was. That's all Doctor Doom is.
Aesthetically, he looked just like Doctor Doom.
Exactly. So, yes, I would bring him back in. But I don't know whether to bring in the MCU's version of the Kingpin or whether to have someone else entirely.
No, I mean in Daredevil you had Michael Clark Duncan, who wasn't he the first Black Kingpin in the films?
Yeah. God, that was so bad.
I actually kind of like, even though I know I'm not a fan of that film, I actually thought he wasn't too bad, even though obviously he's passed away some years ago, God rest his soul. But I actually thought like he kind of had, I don't know, as the Kingpin, Michael Clark Duncan, he just seemed a bit awkward in that role. I don't know why I felt like that.
I think the whole film just felt awkward, to be fair, because I think everybody just didn't want to be there. I'm trying to think, because the thing is with the Kingpin, no matter how they revamp him, I always think of the 90s cartoon version that was a big guy, but he was very...
Like 6 foot, he must have been like 6'7" or something, or like
6'7". Yeah, exactly. So...
basically, he looked like the Big Show from WWE.
Well, I just had a very random idea, and I know you're going to think, why the hell have I thought of this? So, you know the guy that plays Austin Powers? And he does and he's got there's that Scottish one that he does as well, which is Fat So-and-so. I can't say the actual word because whatever. What if he was actually Kingpin? What if they gave him a fat suit? And you can see where I'm going. It'd be literally a fat... I mean, it'd literally be a fat version of Dr. Evil. I mean, it would sound so odd. But the thing is, he is such a good actor. He can do so many ranges with his voice. He could be so good at being serious. Yeah. And it'd be so much more realistic in terms of what the Kingpin should be. Because the Netflix series, while he was an interesting guy, I just couldn't get it with him. I don't know what it was. I think it was just, for me, it screamed it kept screaming that he had daddy issues. When you watch the Netflix,
I know. Yeah, I know.
I understand the Kingpin is a very violent and very odd, mobster. That's fair enough. But, this is a guy that is cool, calm, and collected in the 90s cartoon show that is amassing an empire and is scaring the bejeebers out of everybody in New York. He is the Kingpin. But that's why I think it would be so funny to have... what's the actor's name that plays as Austin Powers?
Mike Myers.
That's the one. But, it would be so funny just to have him as a bad guy, because when he does play a character, it's very rare anyone can actually tell it's him, or is it just my opinion?
No, I think that's quite right, actually.
So, and the other side as well is the fact that at least then you wouldn't have someone to drastically put on weight just to then shed it again. You could literally just have the fat suit.
Or if you want the best method actor, just hire Christian Bale.
Nah, I mean he's a good guy. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's going to be able to put on enough weight just to be the Kingpin for one movie.
Hello, who are you, Kingpin? Wrong voice.
Oh dear. So we have the basis on the idea of the Secret Wars / Spiderverse.
Yeah.
I still think we would have like the whole Venom thing in a jar that Madam Web siphons it off from Eddie Brock, and it could be like as a last ditch effort. She says to them, perhaps all the Spider-Man at first, this is a random life form from an alternate reality that will enhance your powers, but at a cost. But she doesn't explain what. And it could be like as a last resort that you got Tom Holland's Spider-Man's got no web shooters working. He's completely knackered and bruised. Everything, like his suit's torn to pieces. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man's on his last legs fighting away whoever he's fighting, whether it's Doctor Doom or Kingpin. And Andrew Garfield is trying to hold it together and thinks, right, whatever this thing is, let's use this. And then that's how he becomes the Venom version of Spidey.
Yeah, and then obviously eventually, like it could be even in a separate film, could be later on, like when he eventually gets rid of the Venom suit. It kind of also has that, you know, it goes from like the sad story of Gwen Stacy, then it goes through like the whole dark stage into like this film, and then has the redemption. So it kind of leaves Andrew Garfield on a bit more of a positive note than the last film did.
Yeah, exactly. At least it sort of wraps it all up in a nice little bow.
Yeah,
so,
just as a standalone film, like have it just be a feel good film as well, just like kind of just a throwback to the 90s, you know.
I mean, the other thing as well is that it's a shame that Stan Lee's passed away for quite some time now. But if he was
technically God has passed away.
So if he hadn't have passed away, how would you bring in his cameo? Because obviously it's a Marvel movie, he has to have his cameo.
Well, it's just, I know there's that whole debate. Like, do you remember when Marvel were considering CGI in Stan Lee in films?
Yes.
Yeah, like I don't know, but even though this is like slightly off tangent, but maybe not, you know. Do you feel like you would, or maybe do you feel like maybe his cameo should just kind of go with him?
I think it's a bit of a cheap shot having him CGI'd into films that he's not actually there for. Like, the whole reason why he did the cameos was because despite the fact that not everything Marvel is his, a big majority of it was his legacy, and that's why he did it. Now that he's gone, it's more of a sake that it's sort of playing Where's Wally with someone that's not alive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, you know...
I just thought of an idea.
Go on.
Because I've just remembered at the end of that 90s Spider-Man cartoon, you actually get to meet Stan Lee.
You do. You do, because
so, like, maybe could you have like something at the end of that when having all three Spider-Men go to Stan Lee's office, like at Universal Studios or something?
I mean, it could work, but it's trying to explain as to why, because the only reason why we met Stan Lee in that cartoon was because the main Spidey took back the actor Spidey back to his reality, and as a thank you for his help, he went to visit Stan Lee as a, like, thank you sort of thing.
Yeah, so you had, like, Stan Lee, who obviously created Spider-Man. Then obviously you had an actor that was hired to play Spider-Man, but yet you had Stan Lee, who met the real life superhero version of Spider-Man, and then but the actor was with him as well, but he created that, which isn't real, but then that's
yeah, it's wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff. I mean,
yeah, we need to put that on some t-shirts soon.
Well, unfortunately that's already been done because it's a Doctor Who reference. Yeah, anyway, I don't know, I mean, the other thing as well is, like, if there was a way of doing it, because the thing is, a lot of people don't realize that Spider-Man isn't just Stan Lee, it was also done by Steve Ditko. So if there was a way that you could, like, CGI them in some way, like, in an office together, and you could have them meet all the different Spider-Man and say, "Thank you for creating us," or something along those lines.
Yeah, or just have it be like an end credit thing, or just have it be like a little 2-minute end credit sequence.
Mm. But the other thing as well is, would you have Doctor Strange as part of this film in any way? Because there is going to be Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness. So, would you have him in any way related to this film as a like small cameo or anything at all?
Even though I think he'd do great in the whole film itself, I think I'll just stick to him being in a cameo. So I think it just kind of, I don't know, maybe overload like the film. I think even though it's already overloaded as it is.
I mean, you could, and I know this is sounding a bit too far-fetched, you could have it like the film ends, the credit rolls, and then it fades into the Sanctum Sanctorum, and MCU Spidey is talking to Doctor Strange, explaining to him about the adventure, and it just all like goes from.
So would that be Tom Holland Spider-Man?
Yes, because at least then you. Well, at least then you could have like the Doctor Strange cameo, and it would then at least give into the idea that Doctor Strange has got more on his plate than usual because his normal job is keeping an eye on the Time Stone. Now that he's aware of the whole multiverse, it gives him more of an opportunity to try and delve into more stuff, which could then add to his film later on.
Yeah.
So we've covered the basis of what the story is, the actors. What else can we add to this?
Well, one thing I want to add to that is that if anybody else has listened to this, if you've made it all the way through this, thank you so much. But also, would you agree with this? Like, how would anybody else in the comments section? How would you choose to write this? Who would you insert in as the different Spider-Man? Who would you have as the antagonist? Would you insert a possible CGI Stan Lee in there? Obviously, we always want to know your thoughts in the comments, or even if you go on social media, if you go onto our Facebook, or even if you go onto our Instagram. Always love to know your thoughts. Like, do you agree with anything? Do you disagree with anything? If so, just tell us about it down there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's only so much ranting that I can do and Jack can do. Between the two of us, we do as much as we can, but we're still learning. We're still trying to get this channel going, and hopefully we can get some more stuff going. I think hopefully tomorrow, if Jack's feeling better, we're going to be talking about Power Rangers, which is a topic that I want to go on about because, oh my god, it's such a weird series.
This one, I am buzzed about doing it, mostly because I can't wait to just, poo on it.
Yeah, pretty much. But
yeah, but although, just as a little bit of a quick taster, so you know a bit what to expect, which Power Rangers film are we doing?
We're going to be talking about the 2017 reboot / rebrand. I don't know how you class it, to be fair, because it was essentially just them creating money, because Power Rangers is owned by Bandai, which is the toy company, and so it gives them an excuse to create any new film / TV series / merch. And
the Zords were horrible.
Oh god, so much of it was horrible, but that can be tomorrow's topic because we've been talking about Spidey for about an hour or so.
Yeah, but don't worry. But don't worry for Power Rangers. You're going to want to stick around for that one. Believe me, you're going to want to hang around.
I mean, going back to Spidey as a random thing, would you have any of them as like a little Easter egg that looks similar to an Avenger? Because there's a lot of alternate reality versions of Spider-Man that look like Avengers. So you got like Spider America, which is like Captain America Spider-Man, or you got Iron Spider, obviously being the Iron Man Spider-Man. I mean, there was a brief moment where Spidey actually became a Hulk. So would you have like a Spider Hulk of sorts, or yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I know.
I can't wait to get off this so I can actually have a look.
Yeah, like there's so many variations of Spider-Man. I'm just curious to like what else we can do with him in terms of the Spider-Verse thing. Because as we said, like the main bad guy would be Kingpin and Doctor Doom teaming together to try and wreak havoc with the multiverse. But I mean, the one thing I would say for you to look into is there's a cartoon series I watched a few years ago that was on Disney called Ultimate Spider-Man, which showcased a lot more of the ultimate versions of Spider-Man. But at the same point, it was very, very random. Like, there was a lot of inconsistencies with it. But I don't know. I don't think there's any other Spider characters that you could easily fit into the film without it being too over the top.
Yeah, well, I think there might have to be a part 2 to this video, actually.
Yeah, I think we'd have to probably delve deeper, perhaps into at least the alternate versions of Spider-Man. I mean, we could always do a video on like the multiverse of Marvel, like the variations of the multiverse characters, because DC does have its own multiverse, but each Earth has its own set of characters, give or take. With Marvel, they have the same characters, but different like themed versions of those characters.
Yeah.
So, unless there's anything else you want to add to this, I think we can wrap up.
No, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with this. Hopefully, we can expand on this in a part 2 later on down the line.
Excellent. Well, it's been an interesting video this week, folks. We've been rambling for about an hour and 6-7 minutes. Mostly me rambling about things that Spider-Man may or may not do, and Jack talking about all the past Spider-Man films. As usual, you can find us on YouTube on our links below. There's also Facebook. We're currently on Twitch, as you can see. And any future ideas, just drop us a message on any of those platforms. Links will be down below. And thanks for joining us. So stay safe, stay home, and we'll catch you all soon.